Thanks for listening to Leadership Level Up. I'm Brian Prairie.
And I'm Dr. Jeff Williamson.
I am just starting my leadership journey.
And I've been guiding leaders for 30 years.
Our podcast aims to shine a spotlight on outstanding leaders and provide a platform for them to describe their leadership journey and share the guiding principles that have helped them become great leaders.
Welcome to Leadership Level Up podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Williamson, and we're glad to have you with us today. I'm happy about the friend that's with us. He and I've had many conversations at different places and different times over many years, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. But it's great to have Dr. Michael Johnson here with us. He is a longtime servant and employee at Trevecca Nazarene University in Nashville, Tennessee. We were talking a second ago that our paths crossed in the early 90s when I was at Southern Nazarene University in the Oklahoma City area. And Michael was on staff at Oklahoma City First Church, the Nazarene, and then later he was head baseball coach at Southern Nazarene when they brought that program back. So he had a hand in that, coming back and getting restarted with a lot of success. So we have probably more stories than we have time today. But Michael, it's good, my friend, to have you with us. I've been thinking a long time, I got to get that dude on the podcast. So good to have you with us.
And thank you, Jeff, or Dr. Williamson.
Jeff is okay for you. It's Jeff to you, sir.
The reciprocity of professional courtesy.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
But hey, I think when we first met, we would have probably not had any idea about all the different things that we would end up doing, even in pursuit of academic credentials.
Right.
I joke about the fact that I graduated with a bachelor's degree in 1982, master's degree in 2003, and a doctoral degree, EDD education, in 2020. So about every 17 or 18 years, maybe 20
you
years.
Get the itch.
So now I'm trying to figure out what program I'm going to do in my 80s, So
I'm an optimist. Let's go. I still look at things like that and go, oh, I think that'd be fun. That'd really be good. I'm a learner. What can I say?
At the outset, congratulations on all that's going on there with
thank you.
The leadership, things that you've been involved in all your life kind of came to fruition and converged, if you will, in a beautiful way. And
really, thank you. I appreciate that.
Couldn't be prouder of you. That's awesome.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, that honestly, that was a part of the selection of naming the business, was that it was truly a convergence of different chapters of my life and different parts of my journey, and it kind of brought things together. Part teacher, part friend raiser, as I like to say.
Yeah.
So it's I tell my kids on my best days, I feel like I get paid to be me, and that's a pretty good place to be. So besides you and your honorable service there at Trevecca Nazarene for many years, you're also the podcast host yourself. Your podcast called Michael in the Middle. And I love that because as we've been friends and followed along in social media and otherwise, it's been fun to watch just you being you, of being a peacemaker, a bridge builder, and during different contentious times in our country, you've just graciously and diplomatically said, "Hey, can we find some common ground? Can we be good to each other, maybe even when we disagree, heaven forbid?" And I think it was part of where Michael in the Middle came from, was you just trying to give voice to some reasonable, good people that might not agree on everything, just being good to one another. Is that a fair summary of where that came from?
I think it is. I have found myself across the years being friends with people who weren't friends with each other.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out what that rhythm, what that space looks like a little bit. I think that was a motivator. I could tell you a little bit about, what launched me to even do the doctoral program, and ultimately this podcast that I have going now was a sense at Dr. Stan Toller's memorial service in December of 2017. I would have to say that Stan and his brother Terry both became mentors to me. Working with Terry at Oklahoma City First Nazarene as executive pastor there for a little while. And then after I stepped down from the full-time employee at the church, I actually did some things with Stan as he was working with John Maxwell's Enjoy group and doing model church seminars around the country. I had to supplement my income because what I was being paid.
Baseball coaching wasn't keeping the lights on. Is that what you're telling me?
You got a lot of FaceTime, but there wasn't a lot of time to spend making money. And I loved that passage in my life. Still stay in touch with some of those guys. But at Stan's memorial service, all of us were deeply chagrined about the fact that we felt like his life had been cut short, and that this voice of positivity and encouragement, generosity, somehow was being quieted. And even before the service began, I felt like God was sort of speaking to me about a sense of making myself available for whatever. And literally, I'm giving some detail here, but I'm sitting here.
Okay.
Bethany First Church of the Nazarene, a place with a massive platform stage area. And they've since remodeled, but they didn't substantially change the configuration of that footprint of the stage of the church there. And I felt like I heard the Lord saying, "Are you willing to be used on a bigger platform than the one you currently have?" And I said, yes to that, not knowing what all of that meant in that moment.
Bundle.
And it was also kind of when John Maxwell said, there's 1,000 or so of us here, and we all need to be legs to Stan's legacy. And I heard that, and it was like, well, I can't be Stan Toller, but maybe I can do some of the things that Stan Toller did. And so I kind of crossed the threshold of decision to dive into a doctoral program here at Trevecca. Ended up studying the relationship between generosity, satisfaction with life, and commitment to an organization. And that opened my eyes to a whole lot of different things. And it actually took me until August of 2022 to launch this podcast. I do believe that most people live in between the extremes. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that they don't have strong convictions. That doesn't mean that they don't have strong feelings about how life ought to be lived. It's just that they're not screaming at people about it, And so you use terms like bridge builder and those sorts of things. I think maybe that's kind of been what part of my DNA and calling has been from, as far back as I can remember. And so although I wouldn't call myself viral and I'm not making any big money off of the podcast, it is a cool thing to see, the reach that it's had and the number of watches that it's had on YouTube. My subscriber list on YouTube's growing pretty well, and on iTunes and Spotify. And, like in your own case, you're just trying to figure it out as you go, man.
Yeah. It's like you've got some good things to say, and people are listening. And that's part of the joy of this, is having great conversations about things that matter, and just helping people's voice be heard. I mean, I love that as much as anything.
Thank you.
Yeah. Along with that, I love how your podcast emerged really just from who you are and who you've been as long as I've known you. It's just an outcome of who you've been for a long time. And I think that's why I love it so much. So, as you mentioned, you did the leadership doctoral program there at Trevecca, and, really spent a lot of your research time on that piece of, the meaning in giving and the meaning of the relationships we have with an organization, be that a university, a church, a nonprofit. You found some really cool things out, and we talked other times about that. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about what were 2 or 3 takeaways from your findings of that research about generosity, about the joy that can be found in giving and serving.
Sure. Happy to do so. The the constructs related to satisfaction with life and commitment to an organization were a little more established in the research realm. There were really good instruments that had been in play for study of those two constructs. Generosity's perhaps a little more ethereal, philosophical, but I owe a great debt of thanks to the University of Notre Dame. They have what they call a Science of Generosity project, and they've developed a real base from which people studying the idea of generosity and the historicity of it, those kinds of things. Notre Dame's known for, touchdown Jesus and the football team, but I have come to appreciate them even more for devoting a whole research center to the subject. I think if I was trying to distill it just a little bit, I would start with the notion that the word that we use for generosity, that generosity, so-called in the English language, was derived out of the Latin language, and the word generosus. Mm-hmm. It originally meant a nobility of birth. We talk about the nobles. You watch any of the shows even through the Middle Ages, and as it moves into, even with King Charles being crowned, you have a lot of that old language, and you're viewed a certain way because of your lineage, your birth. But interestingly, that Latin term began to sort of morph into a nobility of purpose, which I like a whole lot better, because that takes the social strata out of the conversation. It's not because of who you were born into as a family. It's what you were born into as a human being, and having this sense of purpose. All of us can possess a nobility of purpose regardless of our bloodline. Yeah. And I believe that we do. The purpose-driven life didn't sell millions and millions of copies just because it was a well-written book. Rick Warren was onto something about the inherent worth of every person, and that God has given us each a sense of nobility of purpose merely by existing, So that means that everybody has a chance to do something noble, with their lives. Yeah. And then I guess the third thing that I would say, just in a very basic sort of way, when you're trying to put together a research document like a dissertation, you have to come up with some definitions, some baselines that you're going to start from. And so the definition of generosity that I worked with was generosity is giving freely and abundantly to others, giving good gifts freely and abundantly to someone else. And so generosity is so much more than money. It's easy for us to break that down, but there's a lot of different ways to look at that term generosity that can be world changing, well beyond what can happen financially. Although I should say, based on what I do for the university, we really do need people to give.
Yeah, yeah. Keep those cards and letters coming in, brothers and sisters.
That's right.
Yeah. No money, no mission, because you have to deliver the mission of whatever organization it is, and the truth is, it takes revenue, it takes resources to do some things. But your point is a good one. That generosity can show up in a lot of different ways. We can be generous with our time. We can be generous with our financial resources. We can be generous with our home. We can be generous, sharing a meal with someone who maybe we don't know as well. And so, the generosity piece absolutely is big in philanthropy realms and fundraising, but it also plays out in a lot of different ways too.
One of the interesting asides, and it's the abstract that I read of it. I mean, I didn't read the entire dissertation, but there was some work done at a research facility, I think in Germany. I'd have to go back and make sure I'm citing that correctly. But University of Lübeck, Lubek, I believe it was, as memory serves, they attached electrodes to certain parts of the brain so they would watch how the synapses would fire when different subjects were brought up. And the argument was that being generous is good for your health. That, I mean, if even as simple an act as thinking about doing something good for someone else fired off all these positive, surges in the brain. And it's like, well, if even thinking about doing something good for somebody else is good for you, how much more would it be to actually take the next step to do something good, to actually do it, as opposed to just thinking about it? There really are a lot of different ways that it could be proven that being good and kind and generous is good for your health physically and emotionally.
And that really took me back to what you said about nobility of purpose.
Yeah.
Even just considering noble and gracious, kind things, and then executing those and doing those for other people. We don't do it so we win, but we win.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's that joy of blessing somebody else, and the friend raising of just elevating other people.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
yeah, I love that. I love that. And I was thinking too, you take that very same concept of nobility of purpose and the joy of elevating others and lifting other people up, and that it does something physiologically good for us, is what, think about taking that into a leadership practice as a leader, as a senior executive, as a director, as a pastor, as a whoever, to approach that leadership role in that way, that they lead with nobility of purpose, and they find that joy in making things better for other people. I mean, that's servant leadership in a phrase, but yet it's a different approach to leadership.
I love that. And the whole nobility thing, I hadn't thought about this in a while, because for one thing, Braveheart is probably one of the most overused leadership movies.
But I love it, man.
but I'm reminded of that moment when William Wallace was talking to, I can't remember the noble's name at this point, but it's been a big bunch of the clans there, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to handle, the next major move and all of that. And Mel Gibson's talking to this guy out in the courtyard, and he said, "You're the one with the nobility. You're the one that by rights should be leading. These people would follow you if only you would lead them. And then so would I." And William Wallace is the one that's the inspirational leader for all of these people, which segues to one of my favorite books that I've read in recent years. It comes from Clay Scroggins, who works with Andy Stanley, or at least used to. He was like one of Andy's, next level leaders,
right hand kind of guy.
And the book, I don't know if you've read it, but How to Lead When You're Not in Charge, which is a whole other concept. When I know you worked in admissions some, I spent time in admissions and in student development later on, and I went to a conference one time, and I went to a session where the longtime associate dean of students at Biola taught on the subject of leading as second. And so you've got all these understandings of leadership that assume that if you're not in charge, or if you're not at the top of the org chart, you can't really lead the organization. But many times leadership is a function of a willingness to do what needs to be done in the moment, and so even if you don't have the positional leadership, there's still that opportunity to do so. And I think, again, just to draw from Braveheart a little bit, William Wallace was never elected. He was never the noble person that by rights of birth should be leading the charge, but he was the one that people wanted to follow because he had the passion and he had the willingness to do something about it, So I think leadership is one of those things that is both inborn and learned, but mainly it's about being willing as much as anything, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's a good insight. I think that too, where you were talking about the Braveheart example, is that it's often the case that there's leaders within organizations, as you said, that may not be at top of the org chart, but it's often those people who are doing the day-to-day execution of the services, be that classroom instructor or student services or those kind of things, that within those pods of a campus or those pods, if you will, of an organization, there are people who are leading a team of 5, 6 well, and that's why other parts of the organization can deliver on their purpose, their mission.
That's good.
And keep their promises, because those frontline people have bought into the mission, hopefully, and the purpose that senior leader has put before them. But without those frontline people, in 100 different places in an organization, I think you just don't really get there in terms of having a top to bottom transformational kind of experience for people.
That's great.
I think that's such a key. I think it's such a key.
No doubt.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your work specifically at Trevecca. You're special aid to the president. You do all kinds of cool, creative things. You're pretty much like the international ambassador for Trevecca, short of Dr. Boone. I defer to him, of course, as your president and leader. But besides him, I mean, I just think of you as the beloved ambassador of Trevecca Nazarene University. So tell us about some of the ways and things and events and travels that you do to just continue to stay connected and engaged with the constituency of the university.
I posted on Facebook yesterday about a prayer walk that was conducted here on campus with some retired ministers and lay people from around town. And there's probably another 8 to 10 that are on the email list, that will be a part of that. We hope in an ongoing sort of way. That was a great moment to walk around campus with these friends of Trevecca, to pray that we would have a great year and that we would continue to matter in the lives of students and make a difference in the world. Those kinds of almost cliche sort of things that we say about ourselves as a Christian college, but yet need to be validated by action, and so I love that aspect of it. But and this is on my mind every now and then, but I wrote in there, as I begin my 34th school year as a professional employee of the university. It dawned on me again, people say nice things about me and the work that I do here, or that I'm, like you say, an ambassador, the face of, the university in some settings and all that. I mean, all of that's true. Part of that's just due to the fact that I've been here a really long time. I worked here in 1985 to 1982 in admissions, and then public information / marketing. We moved to Oklahoma for 5 years, came back here in 1997, did 12 years as assistant dean of students. And then in 2009, Dr. Boone brought me over, and I've had varying titles based on what needed to be done at the time, including the dual roles of alumni and church relations. And my current title is aide to the president for special projects and engagement officer for church partnerships. And what that simply means is that now we have a person working in alumni relations full-time, which is awesome. Jen Showalter. I don't know if you've met Jen before, but she's great. And so she's come back on to help with all those alumni-oriented activities. But because I've been here for so long and known so many people across the years, pretty much anything that happens here with my work history, I've had some measure of, involvement in it. Even in athletics. I was women's golf coach here for almost 13 years. And I did public address for our basketball game, 31 seasons across my lifetime, and don't do that anymore now. Just kind of like to hang around and come to the games when I can. All of that to say this, Jeff, I think anybody who's involved with an organization over a span of time, and when I say a span of time, I mean, I'm talking like decades, maybe, people don't contact me so much because of what they know my title to be. They contact me because they know me. you know, and so while I have specific responsibilities in the areas of relationships, you know, keeping those strong between our, depending on the day, 850 or so churches around the Southeast.
No pressure.
You know, trying to manage expectations of those local churches with the university, and also be a resourcing and equipping agency as an educational institution. That's very important for us to do. The special projects thing is something new for Dr. Boone to have at his disposal. Because I have worked with him for a long time, and because I have longevity here at the university, he knows that he can kind of plug me in kind of like wherever.
Sure.
So along the way, since 2009, I've been working with some donor development at different levels, not only the church realm, but, you know, individual donors as well. And the current special project, and we'll be talking about this more as a university in the coming weeks and months, is leading now the charge to try to raise $35 million for a new athletic facility. And this time we're pretty much going to have it all underwritten, as opposed to, you know, just saying
raise half of it and then start digging a hole in the ground, right? Yeah.
You know, so we all have our work cut out for us. We've had several meetings this week. We're going to have another meeting tomorrow with our internal team, along with Dr. Boone, to talk about who those individual prospects are that we need to be talking to, and who can help us meet the people we don't know yet that could help make this a reality. You know, in today's economy, you need to be casting your net pretty wide, you know, to find out who is it that really needs maybe to give some money away, and who has money to give away but just needs that noble purpose to give it to, you know? So that's kind of in a nutshell what I'm doing.
That's exciting.
I'm involved in all kinds of things on behalf of the university, and honored to be so. I would have to admit that sometimes at this stage of life, I wonder where Trevecca begins, you know, and Michael ends, or vice versa. Do I have a persona for people outside of my work with Trevecca? And is that cool? Is that okay? And to this point, I would have to say that I'm honored if people think of Trevecca, that my name might come up on the bulletin board. You know, I don't know. I love the university. I love the idea of higher education in a Christian context.
Too. Yeah, me
just
too.
As an idea, it's still very important to the fabric of our nation, I believe. Higher ed is a challenging business to be in right now. So few of us have the $1 billion plus endowments at some of the big Ivy Leagues and even some of the state schools. You know, state schools don't have to have the same kind of endowment. They have a perpetual endowment based on the state budget, you know. Yeah. But you know, I mean, I drove by Vanderbilt during the lunch hour over here, and they just keep building brand new buildings, and it comes so easy to them. They become such a behemoth, and I don't mean that pejoratively at all. It's just it's a place where people, you know, they want to give money to it because they want their name attached to something with that sort of reputation, you know. But for smaller schools like ours, it takes really committed people.
It does.
And so it's a daunting challenge, but I'm pretty encouraged based on what some of the early returns are, at least on the excitement about the project.
Yeah, and that's a part of it.
Into some real commitments for gifts.
You do what I love to call friend raising, you know, because for 10 years I taught a fundraising course at Olivet in the nonprofit concentration, and I said on day one of every class, relationships are everything.
Yeah.
And that's a part of the friend raising reality is people want to give to causes they believe in and they care about, but they also want to have that process involve people that they trust that are equally committed to the mission and purpose of that.
Yeah.
And that comes back to your nobility of purpose that you referenced earlier on.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, thanks so much for being here with us. Always good to talk to you. I love hearing the good things you're doing, what's going on at Trevecca, and those are so beautifully intertwined. But I would add to your question of yourself that in spite of the beautiful 30 plus years there, you've got a lot to offer outside the borders of Trevecca Nazarene University. I think you can look at your podcast numbers and see that a lot of people like what you're about and what you're doing. And I love how you're giving voice to reason and kindness and diplomacy among folks that even when we don't agree. I love to say when somebody raises a difference, of opinion, I'm like, well, we can still be friends. That's the good news, right? And I think that's your heart too, and I appreciate that so much. So thanks for coming on with us. We'll look forward to it. And you have to promise to wear that shirt the next time we have you on the show.
Okay. All right.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Leadership Level Up. Please subscribe so you don't miss future conversations with great leaders.